Hello, everyone. I'm Kim Snyder, the Director of Teacher and Principal Support at the Nebraska Department of Education. I'd like to thank you for joining my esteemed colleagues and me as we talk about one of the newly revised Nebraska Teacher and Principal Performance Standards. I'll have my colleagues introduce themselves now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ellie Fields, and I'm a former high school student from Harvard Public Schools.
Hi, I'm Michelle Helt, a third grade teacher in South Sioux City and the 2018 Nebraska Teacher of the Year.
Hi, I'm Charity Labrie, a principal with Grand Island Public Schools.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Downing. I'm an ESU staff developer at ESU 13, and I also work in partnership with NDE as an educator effectiveness specialist.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Tion. I'm on the faculty here at the University of Nebraska at Kearney, where I work in educational administration.
Thanks, everybody. The Teacher and Principal Performance Standards serve as the foundation of a much broader educator effectiveness system, which focuses on a shift in how Nebraska supports and develops its teachers and principals. The standards are rooted in two primary themes, equity and database decision-making, which become visible through a common language of expectations, a better understanding of the supports and skills necessary to be effective teachers and principals in Nebraska, a commitment to staff support and development, and a focus on family and community engagement. The standard that we're going to discuss now is the Teacher Standard Assessment. And Michelle, since you're the teacher of this crew, I'll have you go ahead and start talking about it while I share my screen.
All right. When I hear assessment, I think of the importance of using a variety of assessments with focus on informing instruction and monitoring student progress, not catching a student who has not mastered the material.
When I think of assessment, I think of the weight and the pressure that students feel that can make or break their grade. For some students, these assessments seem irrelevant and unimportant to their learning, but I wonder if this conversation will change my opinion on the subject.
I think of how each teacher has flexibility in providing a variety of assessments to check for understanding throughout the lesson and unit.
My assumption is that a major component of this assessment standard is the importance of balance in the teacher and district approach to assessment. Effective instruction is critical for student learning, and a systematic and balanced assessment strategy improves effectiveness. Let's see if all of our assumptions align with these standards.
The standard itself reads, the teacher systematically uses a balanced assessment system that includes formative, interim, and summative assessments to measure student progress and to inform ongoing planning, instruction, and reporting.
Indicator A says, an effective teacher utilizes formative, interim, and summative assessments that align to district and state standards, learning goals, and instructional objectives.
Assessment literacy is critical when assessing student learning. Teacher preparation programs provide basic skills in the various types of assessments, which are to be enhanced by districts as new teachers begin their career. New teachers will need support as they work to find balance between their assessment philosophy and the expectations of the district.
Assessment is an important part of the planning process. Teachers should know what student evidence they are looking for and how they will assess mastery of that content. Effective teachers plan the right assessment at the right time to ensure students have learned the content for the lesson and standard. This is an area where teachers may struggle, as they may need support in learning how to use formative assessment to guide instruction along the way. This reminds me of what Mrs. Helt mentioned earlier about using assessment as a tool to guide instruction, not as a way to catch students.
Every assessment should be directly aligned to district and state standards and should serve a purpose. The purpose of each assessment will either inform instruction, monitor student progress, inform pacing, and/or determine the need for extension or intervention based on student need. It is easy for teachers to become overwhelmed when considering all the different types of assessments, as well as when and how to align to the district and state standards. That is why it is important for teachers to continue to grow in their assessment literacy.
ESUs can help schools by looking at systems alignment. This is an important conversation for all educators to ensure the effectiveness of district, building, classroom, and student goals. Sometimes we find ourselves rich in data, but in need of support to analyze and apply the assessment data. Often support is found in asking better questions and aligning our efforts towards goals.
Indicator B says an effective teacher uses a variety of district-supported, classroom-based assessments that confront and eliminate institutional bias and student marginalization, meet all students' developmental needs, and ensure each student has the opportunity to demonstrate understanding.
Assessment is a vital component of classroom instruction. It is imperative teachers disaggregate data, even the uncomfortable data, that shows the opportunity gaps marginalized student groups face, and use that data as a foundation for ensuring the success of each student. The administration of unbiased assessments is necessary when gathering information on the learning progression of students, which means at times the assessment needs to be adapted to best meet the needs of individual students and specific student groups. An example of an assessment adaptation might include verbally assessing instead of writing. The assessment itself should not be a barrier to students as they demonstrate their learning. Assessment cannot be confused with grades. They are not one and the same. Assessments measure student learning and should not be influenced by student behavior or any other characteristics that students have that may expose a teacher's personal bias. Student actions should be separate from content knowledge. At times, it is difficult to separate student behavior from content knowledge acquisition, but it is necessary to focus and reflect on student learning and growth.
As Mrs. Helt stated, it's imperative that teachers disaggregate data. As a principal, it is my job to ensure they are looking at all relevant forms of data, even the uncomfortable data, that will lead to the identification of institutional and personal biases. Teachers and administrators may need support to create a vulnerable space where they can have these tough conversations and apply the ownership of these biases to close the ever-present student opportunity gaps. It is important to ensure behavior and academic knowledge are not one and the same. There is power when teachers come together to analyze student data and create steps to move the learning forward. Assessment should be district supported and provide equitable opportunities for all students to show their learning.
It is imperative now more than ever before that Nebraska's educators and everyone else in the educational community come together and have difficult discussions about those students who are being underserved in our schools. It's impossible to support and develop teachers and principals without being willing to work as a state to ensure that we have addressed the institutional biases that place barriers in front of students intentionally or unintentionally. Together, as a state, we need to support our schools so they can build a school culture in which attitudes and dispositions are more justice-minded and equity-driven.
Indicator C says an effective teacher uses formative, interim, and summative assessments and the resulting data to inform instruction, monitor student progress over time, and provide meaningful feedback to each student.
A variety of assessments need to be utilized in the classroom in order to guarantee a complete picture of each student's learning progression. Just administering the assessment is not enough though. Teachers need to analyze the data to determine the next course of action, but also to provide timely, specific, and meaningful feedback to students so that students have a greater sense of ownership in their learning.
Assessment data aids in identifying trends in student learning and informing actionable steps for instruction. Receiving feedback about these actionable steps leads to conversations about student achievement and growth. Intentionally devoting time during class to have two-way interactions with students about their progress is imperative in providing meaningful feedback. Feedback can be verbal, written, or peer review. Teachers must create classroom systems for students to receive consistent feedback.
Leveraging assessment that is aligned serves a student-centered purpose and helps teachers monitor and adjust teaching. This is an ESU role in professional development and growth. Curriculum alignment work starts with standards and builds priorities to help staff understand that formative assessment is about proficiency levels to determine what students know and can do. The best practice is to create a school and district culture in which systems of support, inclusive of learning, behavior, mental health, and growth, are the norm.
Indicator D says an effective teacher analyzes formative, interim, and summative assessment data individually and with colleagues to ensure alignment to instruction.
Analyzing assessment data both individually and within teacher teams, will create an instructional environment rooted in current levels of student understanding. Teacher teams must meet consistently to analyze both formative and summative data. The time spent analyzing data within teacher teams is time well spent. From these discussions, important decisions about next steps of instruction will occur.
Teaching teams must work collaboratively to analyze data and share ideas of successful teaching strategies. Leveraging resources is another important step to benefit student learning and creating intentional small groups focused on student learning needs.
Using data to positively impact instruction and increase student achievement is a learned skill. While teachers get some experience in data analysis in their teacher preparation programs, it is critically important that teachers are supported as they transition into a new role in a building or district, as many teachers find this overwhelming.
Indicator E says an effective teacher provides students with constructive, specific, and frequent feedback during and after instruction to enable students to assess, adjust, monitor, and reflect on their own progress towards learning goals.
Effective teachers provide timely, specific, and meaningful feedback, but they must also teach students how to reflect on their own learning. The first step in teaching students to reflect on their learning requires clear learning objectives provided by the teacher. Once students understand exactly what is expected of them, they can reflect on the steps they have mastered and determine their next learning focus. In order for students to successfully reflect on their own learning, teachers will need to model the process and provide time for reflection within class.
Student reflection must be incorporated daily, and time must be devoted to allow students to reflect on their learning goals and steps forward concepts they have mastered during the day's lesson. Goal setting and standards tracking is a major part of students owning their learning. Systems must be in place to allow feedback and conversations around students' learning goals.
The important work of reflection is supported by ESU training, facilitation and coaching efforts in assessment literacy, curriculum alignment, classroom strategies, and school improvement work. Like students, teachers also need to understand expectations, grow from feedback, and find their own voice for reflection.
Indicator F says an effective teacher accurately documents and clearly communicates assessment data about student progress over time to relevant stakeholders.
As a principal, it is my job to be sure systems are in place to accurately document student learning and their growth towards standards mastery. I must also make sure teachers know their students and standards well and are able to clearly communicate students' learning successes and areas of growth.
As teachers collect a body of evidence for each student, which consists of data from formative and summative assessments, they need to record the data in a way that focuses on learning growth and progression. The data will be essential in communicating each student's growth towards standards mastery.
After listening to this conversation, I realize and appreciate when teachers use a variety of assessments that match each student's educational needs, as well as their personal interests and creativity. In my own experience, I have had assessments where we create projects that help us reflect what we learned. Each group had the freedom to choose whatever project they wanted. And what I appreciate about this type of assessment is that it not only differentiates the uniqueness of each student, but it also allows the students to work in groups that share common educational skill levels. And I also think it is very important to reflect on such assessments. Assessments and grades are not the same thing. Assessments are about what you are learning, and the grade is about whatever system is in place. Neither an A nor an F should define who you are as a learner. Oftentimes, students and teachers mistake a letter grade for mastery of material, but in all reality, there are so many other factors that contribute to mastery of content that contribute to a student's grade, such as environment, behavior, ability to perform on tests, learning styles, and many more. Sometimes I feel like a grade game we all play, where sometimes the student's lack of ability to behave maturely keeps them from getting a good grade, even though they might be fully competent to do so. I don't think a student's letter grades reflect solely on who they are as a person. I think assessments are vital in better understanding a student as a whole. Assessments and data to reflect on are all positive tools that help understand the student more adequately, but should not be used exclusively.
Thank you again for joining us as we talked about one of the standards. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach me at this email address. Thank you.